In the beginning there is always the descent. Not the descent the world teaches us to fear, the falling away from success, from approval, from the bright surfaces where we display our carefully curated selves, but the sacred descent into the chambers of our own being, where the ego's desperate songs echo against walls that have witnessed every performance, every plea, every mask we've worn in our relentless pursuit of being seen as good, as right, as worthy of love. Here, in these depths, something else awaits, something the surface world cannot touch, cannot manipulate, cannot buy or sell or judge. It is the silence that births true power, not the power that conquers, but the power that transforms, not the power that wounds, but the power that heals. This is the domain of the wounded healer, the one who has made the journey into their own darkness and discovered, with wonder and terror, that the shadow they feared was not their enemy but their greatest teacher. Listen carefully, for this is where your story truly begins. Not with the first breath you took in this world, but with the first breath you took in the underworld of your own psyche, where the rules of ordinary consciousness no longer apply, where the ego's frantic attempts to maintain control dissolve like mist before the rising sun of authentic being. The wounded healer knows a secret that the world desperately tries to keep hidden, that our deepest wounds are not curses but gateways, not evidence of our brokenness but proof of our capacity for wholeness. Every scar is a story, every hurt a doorway, every moment of profound pain an invitation to discover what lies beneath the surface of our carefully constructed lives. But first, there must be the wounding. The psyche, in its infinite wisdom, ensures that we are cracked open precisely where we need to be opened. The universe conspires to break us in the places where we are most defended, most rigid, most convinced of our own rightness. This breaking is not punishment but mercy, the mercy of a cosmos that loves us too much to leave us trapped in the prisons of our own making. You know this breaking intimately, don't you? You know the moment when the ground beneath your feet suddenly gave way, when the story you told yourself about who you were and how life worked crumbled like ancient parchment. Perhaps it came through betrayal, through loss, through the slow realization that everything you thought you could count on was as temporary as morning dew. Perhaps it arrived through illness, through failure, through the terrible gift of seeing yourself clearly for the first time. In that moment of breaking, the ego screams. It rails against the unfairness, demands explanations, seeks someone to blame. It performs its most elaborate dramas, weaving tales of victimhood and righteousness, casting itself as the innocent sufferer in a world gone mad. This is natural, necessary even. The ego must exhaust itself in this way before it can surrender to something greater. But beneath the ego's protestations, something else is happening. In the depths where thought cannot penetrate and words cannot reach, a transformation is beginning. The wounded part of you, the part that has been broken open, begins to compost, to decay, to return to the fertile darkness from which all new life emerges. This is the sacred wound, the crack through which the light enters, the place where your human vulnerability meets the divine mystery of existence. The wounded healer is born in this liminal space, this threshold between death and rebirth, between the known self and the undiscovered country of authentic being. They are the one who has descended into hell and returned, not with tales of horror, but with the profound stillness that comes from having met their own darkness face to face and recognized it not as enemy, but as guide. The stillness, this sacred silence, is not the absence of sound, but the presence of depth. It is the quiet that holds all possible responses, all potential words, all conceivable actions in a state of pure potential until the moment of truth arrives. It is the pause between heartbeats where eternity lives, the space between thoughts where wisdom dwells, the interval between breaths where the soul reveals its secrets. When the wounded healer speaks from this place of silence, their words carry a quality that cannot be manufactured, cannot be learned from books, cannot be acquired through techniques or strategies. They speak from the place where personal pain has been transformed into universal understanding, where individual suffering has become collective wisdom, where the particular wound has become the general healing. This is why their calm reply haunts forever, not because it seeks to wound in return, but because it comes from a place so deep, so true, so undefended, that it awakens in others the memory of their own forgotten depths. It reminds the listener of what they have buried beneath layers of protection, what they have sacrificed in their quest for safety, what they have denied in their desperate attempt to belong. The healing power of this silence is terrible and beautiful. Like all truly sacred things, it offers no easy comfort, no quick fixes, no simple answers. Instead, it offers something far more precious, the recognition that you are vast enough to contain your own pain, deep enough to transform your own poison into medicine, strong enough to alchemize your own lead into gold. But this recognition comes at a price. To access the wounded healer's silence, you must first be willing to descend into your own underworld, to face the parts of yourself you have rejected, to embrace the aspects of your nature you have denied. You must be willing to die to who you thought you were in order to discover who you actually are beneath all the layers of conditioning, expectation, and self-protection. This death is not metaphorical. It is real, visceral, complete. The ego must truly die, not be wounded or humbled or chastened, but die. Its strategies must fail utterly. Its defenses must crumble completely. Its sense of control must be revealed as the illusion it has always been. Only in this death can something new be born, something that has never existed before in the history of the universe, your authentic self. The wounded healer carries the scars of this death and rebirth in their very being. They move through the world with the authority of one who has journeyed to the land of the dead and returned with treasures beyond price. Their presence itself becomes a teaching, their silence a sermon, their very being a bridge between the world of surfaces and the world of depths. When they finally speak, when the moment arrives that calls forth their response, their words emerge not from the reactive mind, but from the eternal wellspring of the soul. They speak not from personal grievance, but from archetypal truth, not from individual hurt, but from universal wisdom, not from the desire to win, but from the commitment to heal. This is the terrible beauty of the wounded healer's calm reply. It comes from a place of such profound understanding, such deep compassion, such unshakable truth, that it cannot be argued with, cannot be defended against, cannot be dismissed or forgotten. It haunts not because it seeks to harm, but because it reveals what is, and what is, when spoken from the depths of authentic being, has the power to transform everything it touches. The silence from which this reply emerges is not the silence of suppression or denial, not the quiet of fear or withdrawal, but the silence of fullness, of depth, of profound presence. It is the silence of the mystic who has touched the face of the divine and found it to be their own reflection, the silence of the sage who has discovered that the kingdom of heaven is not somewhere else, but right here in the depths of their own being. In this silence, all possibilities exist simultaneously. Love and truth dance together. Compassion and clarity unite in sacred marriage. Strength and vulnerability reveal themselves to be one and the same. This is the silence that gives birth to the haunting reply, the response that comes not from reaction but from revelation, not from woundedness but from wholeness, not from the ego's desperate need to be right but from the soul's profound commitment to being real. Now comes the fire. Now comes the testing that will either forge you into gold or reduce you to ash. The world, in its unconscious wisdom, begins to hurl itself at you. Not randomly, not carelessly, but with the precision of a master alchemist, who knows exactly which temperature will crack the shell of your false self and reveal the treasure hidden within. They come at you with their projections, these fellow travelers on the path of human suffering. They arrive carrying the weight of their own unlived shadows, their own rejected parts, their own desperate need to find someone, anyone, who will carry the burden of what they cannot face in themselves. You become their screen, their canvas, their container for all the rage and fear and shame they dare not acknowledge as their own. Watch how it unfolds. See how the one who has never faced their own capacity for cruelty accuses you of heartlessness. Observe how the one who has built their entire identity around being good needs you to be evil so their goodness can shine in comparison. Notice how the one who has never descended into their own darkness requires you to embody that darkness so they can continue to live in the illusion of their own light. This is not random. This is not unfair. This is the precise mathematics of the unconscious, the elegant choreography of projection and shadow work that governs all human relationships. You have been chosen, yes, chosen to serve as the alchemical vessel for their transformation, just as they have been chosen to serve as the catalyst for yours. But here is what they do not understand, what they cannot see through the fog of their own unconsciousness. Every arrow they shoot at you passes first through the heart of their own being. Every accusation they hurl reveals more about their inner landscape than about yours. Every manipulation they attempt exposes the very wounds they are trying so desperately to hide. The crucible burns hot now. The temperature rises with each attack, each projection, each desperate attempt to make you responsible for their inner chaos. They bring their rage, the rage they have been carrying for decades, the anger at life for not giving them what they believed they deserved, the fury at themselves for choices they cannot undo. They dump it at your feet like burning coals and demand that you pick it up, carry it, make it yours. They bring their fear, the terror of being seen as they truly are, the panic of losing control, the dread of facing the parts of themselves they have spent their entire lives running from. They wrap this fear in accusations, dress it up as righteous indignation, present it to you as if it were your creation rather than their inheritance. They bring their shame, the deep, wordless knowing that they have betrayed their own soul, that they have lived a life at odds with their true nature, that they have become strangers to themselves in their quest to be acceptable to a world that was never going to accept them anyway. This shame too must be yours to carry, they insist. This too must be your fault. And so the fire rages. The crucible becomes a furnace of emotional violence, of psychological warfare, of spiritual terrorism disguised as concern, as love, as trying to help you see the truth about yourself. The heat is unbearable. The pressure is crushing. Everything in you that is not essential begins to burn away. This is the moment of ultimate choice, the fork in the road that determines whether you will emerge from this fire as gold or as ash. The reactive self, the wounded ego that has been collecting grievances like sacred relics, screams for retaliation. It demands satisfaction, justice, revenge. It wants to meet fire with fire, projection with counter-projection, shadow with shadow. How seductive this path appears in the midst of the burning. How righteous it feels to give them back what they have given you, to show them the mirror of their own unconsciousness, to make them taste the medicine they have been forcing down your throat. The ego promises that this will bring relief, that this will restore balance, that this will finally make them understand. But the wounded healer who dwells in your depths knows better. They have walked this path before, have seen where it leads, have witnessed the endless cycle of unconscious reaction that keeps humanity trapped in its own hell. They know that meeting shadow with shadow only creates more shadow, that responding to unconsciousness with unconsciousness only deepens the collective sleep. Instead, they whisper to you of another way. They speak of the alchemical transformation that becomes possible when you refuse to be reduced to their level, when you decline the invitation to dance the ancient dance of mutual destruction. They remind you that gold is forged not by adding more fire, but by allowing the fire to burn away everything that is not gold. This is the great work, the opus magnum of psychological transformation, to remain conscious in the face of unconsciousness, to stay present in the midst of projection, to hold the tension of the opposites without being torn apart by them, to become the vessel strong enough to contain the fire without being consumed by it, the alchemical chamber in which base metals are transformed into precious gold. But make no mistake, this is not passive acceptance. This is not spiritual bypassing or premature forgiveness or any of the other ways the ego tries to avoid the full intensity of the crucible. This is active engagement with the fire, conscious participation in your own transformation, deliberate choice to use this heat for forging rather than for destruction. You must feel it all: the rage at being misunderstood, the pain of being attacked, the grief of being rejected. You must allow these emotions to burn through you like fire through dry wood, consuming everything that is false, everything that is defended, everything that is trying to protect an image that was never real anyway. Feel the fury at their projections, but do not become the fury. Experience the hurt of their accusations, but do not identify with the hurt. Witness the fear that arises when they threaten your sense of identity, but do not let the fear make your decisions. You are the awareness that observes all of these experiences, the consciousness that remains untouched, even as the personality burns. In this crucible, you begin to understand what they are actually offering you. Beneath their unconscious projections lies a gift more precious than any they could offer consciously: the opportunity to discover what in you is real and what is merely constructed, what is essential and what is simply protective, what belongs to your authentic being and what you have taken on from the world around you. Their rage shows you where you still carry rage. Their fear reveals where you remain afraid. Their shame exposes where you have not yet forgiven yourself. They become your perfect mirror, reflecting back to you, with ruthless accuracy, every aspect of your own shadow that still requires integration, every part of your own being that still needs healing. This is why they have come, not to destroy you, though destruction may be part of the process, not to harm you, though harm may be inevitable along the way. They have come to serve as the catalysts for your transformation, the agents of your individuation, the unwitting servants of your soul's deepest purpose. The fire burns hotter now. The projections come faster, more intense, more desperate. They sense that something is different about your response, that you are not reacting in the expected ways, that you are not taking the bait they are so carefully laying. This frightens them even more, drives them to greater extremes, pushes them to reveal more and more of their own shadow in their attempts to make you carry it. Watch them carefully now. See how their own unconsciousness is being exposed by their very efforts to hide it. Notice how their attempts to make you the problem are revealing exactly what the real problem is. Observe how their projections are boomeranging back to them with increasing force, creating the very confrontation with their own shadow that they have been trying so desperately to avoid. This is the enantiodromia beginning to unfold. Jung's principle that everything contains its opposite and will, given time and pressure, transform into it. Their attempts to make you unconscious are making them more unconscious. Their efforts to avoid their own shadow are bringing them face to face with it. Their desire to remain superior is revealing their own inferiority complex in all its naked vulnerability. You are witnessing the birth of their own dark night of the soul, the beginning of their descent into the underworld of their own psyche. They do not know this yet. They are still convinced that you are the problem, that you are the one who needs to change, that you are the one who is broken. But the crucible is working on them too, whether they know it or not, whether they want it or not. The gold in you is beginning to emerge now, refined by the fire, purified by the heat, strengthened by the pressure. You are becoming something you have never been before. A conscious being in an unconscious world, a clear lake in the midst of a storm, a still point around which the chaos can swirl without disturbing your essential peace. From this place of emerging authenticity, you begin to see them with new eyes. You see through their projections to the wounded child beneath, through their attacks to the fear that drives them, through their desperate need to make you wrong to their own terror of being wrong themselves. Your heart begins to break, not with pain but with compassion, not with hurt but with understanding. This is the moment when the calm reply begins to gestate in the depths of your being, not as strategy, not as technique, not as weapon, but as natural expression of the gold that has been forged in the fire of their unconsciousness. It is being born from your willingness to be transformed rather than to transform them, from your commitment to consciousness rather than to being right, from your devotion to truth rather than to victory. The crucible has done its work. The fire has burned away everything false, everything defended, everything that was trying to maintain an image at the expense of reality. What remains is pure gold, the authentic self that has always been there, waiting beneath the layers of protection and pretense and people-pleasing to be discovered and claimed and lived. From this place of refined being, when you finally speak, your words will carry the authority of transformation, the power of truth, the haunting beauty of consciousness emerging from unconsciousness. Your reply will be calm, not because you have suppressed your emotions, but because you have allowed them to burn away everything that was not essential. It will be powerful not because it seeks to overpower, but because it comes from the place where all true power is born, the depths of authentic being. Before the gold can emerge, before the authentic self can step forward into the light of consciousness, there must be a death, not the gentle fading of autumn leaves or the peaceful surrender of the monk in meditation, but the violent, desperate, theatrical death of the persona, that carefully constructed mask we have worn for so long, that we have forgotten there is a face beneath it. Watch now as the final performance begins. See how the ego, sensing its approaching dissolution, pulls out every trick it has learned, every strategy it has mastered, every manipulation it has perfected over the long years of survival in a world that seemed to demand anything but truth. This is not a quiet exit, not a graceful bow, not a dignified retirement. This is the death throes of an identity that has confused itself with life itself. The persona was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be a mask, a tool, a useful fiction that allowed us to navigate the complex social waters of human existence. It was supposed to be something we could put on and take off at will, like an actor changing costumes between scenes. But somewhere along the way, the mask fused to the face. The costume became the identity, the performance became the person. Now, as the fire of transformation burns away everything false, the persona realizes its time is ending, and like any entity facing extinction, it fights with everything it has. It marshals all its resources, calls upon every defense it has built, employs every strategy it has learned to maintain its grip on existence. First comes the performance of righteousness. Watch how beautifully it plays this role, how convincingly it presents itself as the defender of all that is good and true and noble in the world. It wraps itself in moral certainty, speaks with the authority of the righteous, positions itself as the guardian of proper behavior and correct thinking. I am only trying to help, it declares. I am only standing up for what is right. This righteousness feels so real, so justified, so necessary. The persona has convinced itself that it is the hero of this story, the one who stands between order and chaos, between civilization and barbarism. It cannot see that its very need to be right is what is keeping it from being real, that its desperate attachment to goodness is preventing it from achieving wholeness. But you, watching from the depths of your emerging authenticity, begin to see through this performance. You recognize the hollowness beneath the noble words, the fear hiding behind the moral posturing, the ego's terror of being seen as anything less than perfect, masquerading as concern for others. The righteousness is revealed for what it has always been, not genuine virtue but defended superiority, not true morality but spiritual materialism. Sensing that its righteousness is no longer working, the persona shifts tactics. Now comes the performance of victimhood. Watch how skillfully it plays this role, how expertly it transforms every challenge into persecution, every boundary into attack, every truth into cruelty. It weaves elaborate narratives of injustice, paints detailed pictures of its suffering, demands sympathy and protection and rescue. "Look how I have been wronged," it cries. "See how unfairly I have been treated. Witness the cruelty that has been inflicted upon my innocent soul." It collects grievances like precious jewels, polishes them until they shine with the brilliance of indisputable truth, displays them for all to see as proof of its blameless suffering. This performance, too, once had power. There was a time when others would rush to comfort, to protect, to validate the persona's version of reality. But now, as consciousness begins to dawn, the manipulation becomes transparent. The victimhood is revealed as another form of control, another way of avoiding responsibility, another strategy for maintaining the familiar patterns that keep the ego safe from transformation. The persona grows more desperate now. Its two favorite roles, righteous defender and innocent victim, are failing to generate the desired response. The audience is no longer buying the performance. Something deeper is being called forth, something the persona cannot provide because it has never been real. Now comes the performance of competence. The persona begins to list its achievements, to catalogue its successes, to remind everyone of its value and worth, and indispensability. Look at all I have accomplished, it proclaims. See how valuable I am, how much you need me, how lost you would be without my wisdom and guidance, and superior understanding. It presents its resume with pride, recounts its victories with satisfaction, displays its knowledge like a peacock, showing its plumage. Degrees and titles and positions become weapons in its arsenal, evidence of its right to exist, proof of its superiority over those who would dare to question its authority. But you, witnessing from the place of growing wisdom, see through this performance as well. You recognize that the persona's competence, while real in its own way, has become a prison, a golden cage, that keeps it from discovering what lies beyond achievement, beyond success, beyond the endless quest to prove its worth through external validation. The persona's panic intensifies. Its cherished performances are falling flat. Its audience is walking away. The very foundation of its existence is crumbling beneath its feet. In its desperation, it begins to perform its final, most elaborate role, the performance of indispensability. You cannot live without me, it whispers urgently. I am the one who has kept you safe all these years. I am the one who has helped you navigate the dangerous waters of human relationship. I am the one who has protected you from rejection, from failure, from the terrible vulnerability of being truly seen. This performance is the most seductive of all because it contains elements of truth. The persona has served important functions, has provided real protection, has helped navigate genuine dangers, but what it cannot see, what it cannot admit, is that its protective functions have now become limitations, its safety strategies have become prisons, its defenses have become the very walls that keep authenticity from emerging. As you watch these performances unfold, a profound compassion begins to arise, not the sticky, sentimental compassion of the ego, but the fierce, clear compassion of consciousness itself. You begin to understand that the persona is not your enemy, but your wounded child, not a villain to be defeated, but a scared part of yourself that has been doing its best with the tools it was given. The persona was born from necessity, crafted from survival, shaped by a world that seemed to require masks in order to be safe. It learned to perform because authenticity felt too dangerous, to pretend because reality seemed too harsh, to be good because being real felt too risky. Every performance, every mask, every elaborate fiction was an attempt to find love, to earn acceptance, to somehow bridge the gap between who it thought it needed to be and who it actually was. But now the world has changed. The inner landscape has shifted. The fire of transformation has created new possibilities, opened new pathways, revealed new potentials. The persona's services, while once essential, are no longer required. Its protection, while once necessary, is now preventing the very thing it was meant to safeguard, the emergence of your true self. The death throes intensify. The persona pulls out every stop, employs every technique, attempts every manipulation it has ever learned. It promises to be better, to try harder, to perform more convincingly. It begs for just one more chance, one more opportunity to prove its worth. It threatens dire consequences if it is abandoned, paints pictures of the disasters that will surely follow if its protection is withdrawn. Without me, you will be rejected, it warns. Without me, you will fail. Without me, you will be alone and abandoned and unloved. I am the only thing standing between you and complete annihilation. These threats once had power because they spoke to primal fears, touched ancient wounds, activated survival mechanisms that had been honed over millennia of human evolution. But now, from the place of emerging authenticity, you can see them for what they are: the desperate attempts of a false self to maintain its grip on existence. The compassion deepens. You realize that the persona is not just your wounded child, but the wounded child of the entire human race, the collective attempt to survive in a world that has forgotten how to recognize and celebrate authentic being. Every mask it has worn has been worn by countless others. Every performance it has given has been replicated across cultures and centuries. This recognition brings a profound shift in your relationship to the persona's death throes. Instead of fighting against them or trying to hurry them along, you begin to witness them with the tenderness of a midwife attending a birth. Because that is what this is. Not just a death but a birth. Not just an ending but a beginning. Not just the dissolution of the false but the emergence of the true. The persona's performances begin to slow now, to lose their intensity, to fade into exhausted whispers. It has played every role it knows, employed every strategy it has mastered, performed every scene in its repertoire. Nothing has worked. The audience has departed. The theater is empty. The final curtain is falling. In this moment of ultimate defeat, something beautiful happens. The persona stops performing and, perhaps for the first time in its existence, simply is. Without the costumes and makeup and elaborate staging, without the scripts and roles and carefully rehearsed lines, it reveals itself as what it has always been beneath all the performances: a frightened, lonely, desperately wanting to be loved aspect of your own being. This revelation is heartbreaking and liberating in equal measure. Heartbreaking because you see how much pain the persona has been carrying, how much effort it has expended in its quest to be acceptable, how much of itself it has sacrificed in its attempt to earn love through performance. Liberating because you finally see it clearly without the elaborate disguises and recognize it as part of yourself that can now be embraced, integrated, healed. The death of the persona is complete now, but it is not the death of annihilation. It is the death of separation, the death of isolation, the death of the exhausting attempt to be something other than what you are. The persona dissolves not into nothingness but into the greater wholeness of your emerging authentic self, like a drop of water returning to the ocean from which it was never truly separate. From the ashes of this death, something unprecedented begins to arise. Not another persona, not another mask, not another performance, but the authentic self that has been waiting patiently beneath all the costumes and scripts for its moment to emerge. This self needs no performances, because it is not trying to impress. It requires no masks because it has nothing to hide. It employs no strategies because it has no agenda other than to be truthfully, completely, unapologetically itself. This is the self from which the calm reply will eventually emerge. Not the calculated response of the ego, not the defensive reaction of the wounded persona, but the spontaneous expression of authentic being encountering the world without pretense, without agenda, without the desperate need to maintain an image at the expense of truth. The theater is empty now. The costumes lie discarded. The scripts are scattered like leaves in an autumn wind. But you are not empty. You are fuller than you have ever been, pregnant with possibilities you never knew existed when you were busy performing roles written by others. The persona's final performance is over. The real performance, the authentic expression of your true self, is about to begin. And now begins the true dying, the dissolution that the ancient alchemists called the Nigredo, the blackening, the putrefaction, the sacred rot that must precede all genuine transformation. This is not the theatrical death of the persona with its elaborate performances and desperate pleas. This is the quiet, inexorable breakdown of everything you once believed to be solid, true and unchangeable about reality itself. The world, as you knew it, is ending. Not the external world, with its buildings and trees and people going about their daily business, but the internal world that gave meaning to everything external. The framework of beliefs, assumptions, and certainties that once made sense of existence. Like an ancient castle crumbling stone by stone, the structures that once housed your identity begin to collapse into rubble. Watch how it unfolds, this sacred dissolution. One by one, the pillars of your former understanding give way. The beliefs about how life works, how people behave, how justice operates in the world, all of it revealed as elaborate fiction. Carefully constructed stories you told yourself to maintain the illusion of control, of understanding, of safety in an inherently mysterious and unpredictable universe. The relationships that once seemed unshakable begin to reveal their foundations of sand. The career that once defined your worth crumbles under the weight of its own hollowness. The achievements that once proved your value decay like fruit, left too long in the sun. The very ground beneath your feet, everything you counted on to remain stable while you built your life upon it, shifts and buckles and gives way. This is the dark night of the soul that mystics have written about for centuries, but it is also something more visceral, more immediate, more devastatingly complete than any metaphor can capture. It is the experience of watching your entire world dissolve, while you remain somehow aware, somehow present, somehow witness to your own annihilation. The terror is absolute. Every cell in your body screams in protest against this dissolution. Every instinct demands that you fight, that you resist, that you somehow reassemble the familiar world that is crumbling around you. The mind races frantically, seeking explanations, searching for someone to blame, desperately trying to find a way back to the certainty that once felt so solid, so real, so permanent. But there is no going back. The Nigredo has begun, and it follows its own inexorable logic, its own sacred timing, its own mysterious purpose. Like a fire that must burn everything combustible before it can exhaust itself, this dissolution must continue until nothing remains but what cannot be dissolved, until you discover what in you is truly indestructible. The ego, stripped of its beloved personas and performances, finds itself naked in the darkness, shivering not from cold, but from the terrible recognition of its own fundamental emptiness. All the things it used to define itself, roles, achievements, relationships, beliefs, have been revealed as temporary constructions, elaborate sandcastles that the tide of truth has washed away. In this darkness, you encounter the parts of yourself that have been waiting in the shadows for decades, perhaps lifetimes. They emerge like creatures from the deep, bringing with them all the pain you never fully felt, all the rage you never dared express, all the grief you never allowed yourself to complete. These are not foreign invaders, but parts of your own psyche that were exiled long ago, because they were too much, too intense, too threatening to the carefully constructed world you were trying to maintain. Here comes the child who was told to stop crying, carrying decades of unshed tears. Here comes the teenager who was shamed into silence, bearing the weight of unexpressed truth. Here comes the young adult who was convinced to be practical instead of passionate, holding the ashes of abandoned dreams. One by one, they rise from the depths where they have been buried, demanding to be seen, to be heard, to be integrated back into the wholeness you are becoming. The shadow material is overwhelming in its intensity. Every quality you rejected in yourself, every capacity you denied, every aspect of human nature you decided was unacceptable, all of it surfaces now like debris from a shipwreck rising to the surface of the sea. The anger you never allowed yourself to feel burns through your being like acid. The selfishness you condemned in others reveals itself as your own unlived potential for healthy self-regard. The sexuality you suppressed emerges as life force that has been dammed up for decades. Most terrifying of all is the recognition that you are capable of everything you have despised in others. The cruelty, the manipulation, the selfishness, the pettiness. It is all there within you, not as foreign contamination, but as natural human capacity that you have been denying and projecting onto others, rather than acknowledging and integrating within yourself. This recognition brings a nausea that goes deeper than the body, a revulsion that touches the very core of your self-image. Who are you if not the good person you believed yourself to be? What is left of your identity if you cannot even claim moral superiority over those you have judged? The foundation of your entire self-concept crumbles like ancient mortar, leaving you standing in the ruins of your former understanding. The darkness deepens. The Nigredo enters its most intensive phase, where even the ability to imagine a future beyond this dissolution begins to fade. Hope itself becomes a casualty of the process, revealed as another construction of the ego, another attempt to avoid the present moment by projecting into an imagined tomorrow. Faith, too, dissolves. Not just faith in particular beliefs or doctrines, but faith in the very possibility that existence has meaning, that life has purpose, that consciousness itself is anything more than a cosmic accident stumbling through an indifferent universe. Yet even in this absolute darkness, something persists. Call it awareness, call it consciousness, call it the witness that observes even its own dissolution. It is the part of you that remains untouched, even as everything else dissolves, the eternal observer that watches the destruction of everything temporary without itself being destroyed. This awareness does not judge the dissolution or try to prevent it. It does not seek to rescue the ego or preserve the familiar structures that are crumbling. It simply witnesses with a compassion that is beyond emotion and a love that is beyond preference, as everything false returns to the darkness from which it came. In this witnessing, a profound recognition begins to dawn. The dissolution is not happening to you. You are the space in which the dissolution is occurring. You are not the victim of the Nigredo, but its host. Not the casualty of transformation, but its very ground. The awareness that observes the breakdown is itself unbreakable. The consciousness that witnesses the death of all forms is itself deathless. This recognition does not bring comfort in any conventional sense. The pain continues. The dissolution proceeds. The darkness remains absolute. But something shifts in your relationship to the process. Instead of being the one to whom this is happening, you begin to recognize yourself as the space in which this is happening. Instead of being destroyed by the Nigredo, you begin to see that you are the Nigredo, that this breakdown is not separate from you but is you, is the natural movement of consciousness toward its own deepest truth. The compost deepens. Every cherished belief, every beloved assumption, every comfortable certainty continues its decay, returning to the fertile darkness from which all new life must emerge. Like leaves falling from trees to decompose on the forest floor, the structures of your former understanding become the rich soil in which something unprecedented can grow. And in the deepest phase of the Nigredo, when dissolution seems complete and irreversible, something extraordinary begins to happen. From the depths of the compost, tender shoots of new possibility begin to emerge, not the resurrection of what was, but the emergence of what has never existed before, insights that could only arise from the fertile darkness of complete breakdown, wisdom that could only be born from the marriage of consciousness with its own shadow. You begin to understand that the Nigredo is not punishment but purification, not destruction but distillation. Everything that is dissolving was never truly solid to begin with. It was all provisional, all temporary, all elaborate constructions built by a mind that needed to believe in permanence in order to feel safe. What is being revealed beneath all the dissolution is what was always there before any constructions were built, the pure awareness that is your true nature, the unchanging consciousness that has been observing all the changes, the eternal presence that has never actually been absent. The shadow material that seemed so threatening begins to reveal its gifts. The anger you feared carries within it the energy of healthy boundaries. The selfishness you condemned holds the capacity for genuine self-care. The sexuality you suppressed contains the life force that animates all creativity. The darkness you projected onto others becomes the fertile ground for compassion, for you cannot truly understand another's struggle until you have acknowledged your own capacity for the same struggles. The Nigredo begins to transform into something else now, something the alchemists called the albedo, the whitening, the purification, the emergence of clarity from chaos. But this is still to come. For now you remain in the darkness, But it is no longer the darkness of dissolution. It has become the darkness of gestation, the dark of the womb, where new life grows, the black soil from which the green shoots of authentic being are beginning to emerge. The process is not complete. It may never be complete, for the Nigredo is not a single event, but a recurring cycle, a spiral path that leads ever deeper into the mystery of consciousness, knowing itself. But something fundamental has shifted. The terror of dissolution has been replaced by trust in the process. The resistance to breakdown has given way to cooperation with transformation. You begin to understand that this darkness is not your enemy, but your teacher, not your punishment, but your initiation, not your death, but your birth. In learning to die to everything you thought you were, you are discovering what you actually are. In surrendering to the dissolution of all your constructions, you are finding the indestructible foundation that was always there, waiting beneath the elaborate structures of identity and belief. From this place of deep dissolution and emerging recognition, a new kind of response becomes possible. Not the reactive reply of the wounded ego, not the defensive comeback of the threatened persona, but something that emerges from the depths like water from a spring, clear and pure and infinitely refreshing to all who encounter it. The Nigredo has done its sacred work. In the compost of your former self, the seeds of authentic response are beginning to germinate, drawing their nourishment from the rich darkness of everything you had to lose, in order to find what could never be lost. In the aftermath of the great dissolution, when the compost of your former self is still settling into the rich darkness from which new life will emerge, you begin to see with different eyes. The world has not changed. The same people move through the same dramas, playing out the same unconscious patterns, but something in your perception has shifted so fundamentally that it is as if you are seeing everything for the first time. And what you see with startling clarity is that every person who has ever triggered your deepest reactions, every individual who has pushed your buttons with such precision that it felt like they had a roadmap to your wounds, every human being who has caused you to lose your composure and react from your most offended places, they have all been mirrors reflecting back to you aspects of your own psyche that you were not yet ready to see. This recognition arrives not as intellectual understanding, but as visceral knowing, a revelation that reverberates through every cell of your being. The one who criticized you so mercilessly was showing you your own inner critic, the voice that had been tormenting you from within for years. The one who betrayed your trust was reflecting your own capacity for betrayal, perhaps not of others, but of yourself, of your own deepest values, of your own authentic nature. Look back now, through the lens of this new understanding. See how perfectly choreographed it all was. This dance of projection and reflection that governed your relationships, the person who seemed so controlling, was showing you your own need to control, perhaps buried beneath layers of people-pleasing and accommodation. The one who appeared selfish was revealing your own unlived capacity for healthy self-regard, the self-care you had sacrificed on the altar of being seen as good. The colleague who triggered your rage with their incompetence was mirroring your own fear of being inadequate, the terror that lived in the depths of your psyche like a coiled serpent, ready to strike whenever your competence was questioned. The friend who abandoned you in your time of need was reflecting the ways you had abandoned yourself, the countless moments when you had betrayed your own needs in order to maintain the approval of others. Every relationship becomes a hall of mirrors now, each interaction revealing layer upon layer of previously unconscious material. The parent who never seemed satisfied with your achievements was showing you your own impossible standards. The inner perfectionist who could never rest, could never be content, could never simply be enough. The romantic partner who seemed emotionally unavailable was reflecting your own disconnection from your emotional depths, the ways you had armored your heart against the vulnerability of genuine feeling. This is not metaphorical. This is not poetic license. This is the actual mechanics of how the unconscious operates, the precise way in which psyche seeks to know itself, through relationship, through conflict, through the seemingly external dramas that are actually internal processes projected onto the screen of human interaction. The person who judges you most harshly is showing you your own capacity for judgment. not necessarily of others, but of yourself, of the harsh inner voices that have been your constant companions for so long that you no longer notice their cruelty. The one who seems to need constant attention is reflecting your own unlived need to be seen, to be acknowledged, to matter in a world that often seems indifferent to individual existence. Watch how the pattern reveals itself with mathematical precision. The qualities that trigger your strongest reactions in others are invariably the qualities you have most strongly rejected in yourself. The behaviors that make your blood boil are the very behaviors you have forbidden yourself to express, have driven into the darkness of your own shadow, have projected onto others, rather than integrating within yourself. The arrogant person who pushes all your buttons is showing you your own capacity for arrogance, perhaps not the obvious arrogance of superiority, but the subtle arrogance of believing yourself to be different from, better than, more evolved than those you judge. The manipulative individual who seems to know exactly which strings to pull is reflecting your own sophisticated ways of getting what you need without asking directly, your own learned strategies for surviving in a world that seem to punish authentic expression. This recognition brings a profound shift in how you relate to others. The enemy dissolves, replaced by the teacher. The persecutor transforms into the guide. The one who seemed to come to destroy you is revealed as the agent of your liberation, the unwitting servant of your individuation process. But this shift does not come easily. The ego resists this recognition with everything it has, for it threatens the very foundation of its survival strategy. If others are not to blame for your suffering, if they are not responsible for your reactions, if they are actually showing you your own unconscious material, then where does that leave the ego's elaborate stories of victimhood and righteousness? The resistance is fierce. Every cell of your conditioning screams in protest against this new understanding. It feels so much easier, so much safer, so much more familiar to continue seeing others as the source of your disturbance rather than recognizing them as mirrors of your own inner landscape. The ego would rather maintain its grievances than discover its freedom, would rather be right about being wronged than be liberated from the prison of projection. Yet the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. The mirror has been revealed, and its reflections become impossible to ignore. You begin to notice how the person who triggers your anger is showing you your own unacknowledged rage, the fury you have been carrying for years without realizing it, the volcanic emotion that has been building pressure in the depths of your being, seeking expression, seeking recognition, seeking integration. The individual who seems so needy is reflecting your own unmet needs, not for attention or validation from others, but for acceptance and love from yourself, for the kind of unconditional regard that you have been seeking in all the wrong places. The colleague who appears lazy is showing you your own relationship with rest, with ease, with the capacity to simply be without constantly doing, producing, achieving. Each mirror reflects not just the shadow but also the unlived potential, the golden qualities that you have suppressed along with the dark ones. The person whose confidence irritates you is showing you your own capacity for healthy self-assurance, the natural authority that you have buried beneath layers of false humility and people-pleasing. The individual whose creativity you envy is reflecting your own untapped artistic potential, the creative fire that you have dampened in your quest to be practical, responsible, acceptable. The process deepens. You begin to see how every criticism ever leveled against you was actually information about your own inner critic, every attack a revelation of your own capacity for self-attack, every judgment a mirror of your own harsh internal tribunal. The harshness of others becomes a doorway into understanding the harshness you have been directing toward yourself, often unconsciously for decades. This understanding brings a profound compassion, not the sentimental compassion of pity, but the fierce compassion of recognition. You see that the person attacking you is actually attacking themselves, that their cruelty toward you is a reflection of their own inner cruelty, that their inability to see your worth is a mirror of their inability to recognize their own value. They are not choosing to be your teacher. They are not consciously serving as your mirror. They are simply being unconsciously themselves, following the patterns of their own conditioning, acting out their own unintegrated material. Yet in their unconsciousness, they serve the deepest purposes of consciousness itself, creating exactly the conditions you need for your own awakening. The colleague who consistently undermines you is showing you how you undermine yourself, the ways you sabotage your own success, through self-doubt, through imposter syndrome, through the deep conviction that you don't deserve good things. The family member who always makes you feel guilty is reflecting your own relationship with guilt, the way you use this emotion to control yourself, to keep yourself small, to avoid the risk of truly shining. You begin to understand that every relationship is a sacred contract, every interaction an opportunity for mutual awakening. Even the most difficult people in your life are serving your evolution, providing exactly the friction, exactly the challenge, exactly the mirror you need to see what you could not see any other way. This does not mean you become passive in the face of genuinely harmful behavior. This does not mean you allow others to treat you poorly in the name of spiritual understanding. It means you respond from a place of clarity rather than reactivity, from consciousness rather than unconsciousness, from your authentic power rather than your wounded defensiveness. The mirror works both ways. Just as others reflect your shadow back to you, you reflect theirs back to them. Your very presence, your growing consciousness, your increasing authenticity becomes a mirror for their own unlived potential, their own rejected aspects, their own capacity for growth. This is why your transformation threatens them, why your awakening triggers their reactivity, why your peace disturbs their familiar chaos. They see in you what they have not yet allowed themselves to become. They recognize, usually unconsciously, their own potential for growth, for healing, for authentic expression. And this recognition both attracts and terrifies them. Part of them wants to move toward the light you represent, while another part wants to destroy it, because it reminds them of their own darkness. Understanding this dynamic allows you to hold space for their reactions without taking them personally, to remain centered in your own truth without needing to defend it against their projections. You begin to see that their attack on you is actually their attack on their own potential for transformation. Their criticism of you a reflection of their own inner critic's verdict on their possibilities for change. From this place of understanding, a different kind of response becomes possible. Not the reactive comeback of the wounded ego, not the defensive retaliation of the threatened persona, but a response that emerges from the depths of compassionate recognition, the understanding that you are both prisoners in the same jail, both actors in the same play, both mirrors reflecting each other's journey toward consciousness. This is the ground from which the calm reply grows, the recognition that the other is not your enemy, but your teacher, not your adversary, but your reflection, not the source of your disturbance, but the mirror of your own inner landscape. From this understanding comes a response that haunts not because it seeks to wound, but because it comes from a place of such profound recognition, such deep compassion, such unshakable truth, that it awakens in the listener the memory of their own forgotten wholeness. There comes a moment in every confrontation, every provocation, every assault upon your being, when you stand at the crossroads of eternity. In that pause between stimulus and response, between the incoming arrow and your potential reaction, lives the entirety of human evolution. Here, in this infinitesimal space, you choose not just what you will say or do, but who you will become. This is the sacred ground where restraint reveals itself, not as weakness but as the ultimate expression of power. True power, not the crude force that seeks to dominate, not the desperate manipulation that seeks to control, not the reactive violence that seeks to wound, but the power that transforms, the power that heals, the power that liberates both the one who wields it and the one who receives it. This power is born in the crucible of restraint, forged in the fire of choosing consciousness over unconsciousness, presence over reactivity, truth over the temporary satisfaction of being right. Watch how the moment unfolds. The provocation arrives with all its familiar intensity, the words designed to trigger, the actions calculated to wound, the energy specifically crafted to pull you back into the old patterns of unconscious reaction. Your nervous system responds instantly, flooding your body with the chemistry of fight or flight. Every cell screams for immediate action, for swift retaliation, for the relief that comes from discharging the electrical storm of emotion coursing through your being. This is where most humans live and die, in the space of reaction, in the kingdom of automatic response, in the realm where stimuli dictate behavior and consciousness remains asleep at the wheel of existence. The provocateur knows this territory well. They have mapped its contours, studied its weaknesses, perfected their ability to activate your unconscious patterns with surgical precision. But you who have descended into the Nigredo and emerged transformed, you who have seen through the mirrors of projection and recognized the teacher in every tormentor, you have access to something different. You have learned the alchemy of restraint, the sacred art of holding the tension of opposing forces without being torn apart by them. The alchemists understood this principle in their bones. They knew that transformation requires a vessel strong enough to contain the warring elements, stable enough to withstand the heat and pressure of opposing forces seeking resolution. They called this vessel the ethanol, the furnace of transformation. But they knew it was more than mere apparatus. It was consciousness itself, the awareness that could hold fire and water, solve and coagulate, expansion and contraction, in perfect tension, until something entirely new emerged. You have become this vessel. Through the dissolution of your false selves, through the integration of your shadow material, through the recognition of others as mirrors rather than enemies, you have developed the capacity to contain what once would have destroyed you. You can hold rage without becoming rageful, feel pain without being consumed by it, experience the full intensity of human emotion without losing yourself in its storms. This containment is not suppression. It is not the wooden numbness of dissociation or the brittle control of spiritual bypassing. It is the dynamic stillness of the mountain that allows the storm to rage around it without being moved, the deep ocean that can hold tempests on its surface while remaining undisturbed in its depths. It is consciousness learning to be intimate with all of life without being identified with any particular experience. The moment of restraint arrives. The provocation hangs in the air like a sword suspended over the possibility of your reaction. Your body pulses with the energy of potential response. Your mind races through the catalogue of possible comebacks, each one carrying the promise of temporary satisfaction, the illusion of vindication, the sweet poison of revenge. But you pause. In this pause lies the difference between wisdom and cleverness, between power and force, between transformation and repetition. This pause is not hesitation born of weakness, but presence born of strength. The strength that comes from having died to the need to be right, from having been resurrected into the freedom of simply being real. In this pause, you feel it all. The hurt that their words were designed to inflict, the anger at being misunderstood, misrepresented, attacked, the fear that their accusations might contain grains of truth, the grief of realizing that someone you cared about could choose cruelty over kindness. You feel it all, and you let it move through you like weather through sky, present but not permanent, real but not defining. This is the alchemy, allowing the base metals of human emotion to be refined by the fire of consciousness without being consumed by that fire. The rage does not disappear. It transforms into clarity about boundaries. The hurt does not vanish. It becomes compassion for the pain that drives people to wound others. The fear does not evaporate. It clarifies into discernment about what deserves your energy and what does not. You begin to understand what the mystics meant when they spoke of being in the world, but not of it. You are fully present to the human experience, the emotions, the sensations, the entire spectrum of what it means to be incarnated in flesh and blood and vulnerability. But you are not enslaved by these experiences, not at their mercy, not reduced to their level of intensity or reactivity. The pause deepens. Time seems to slow, to expand, to reveal its malleable nature. In this extended moment, you have access to resources that reactivity could never provide. You can see the provocateur not just as they appear in this moment of unconsciousness, but as they are in their essence, wounded, frightened, acting out patterns learned in childhood, desperately seeking something they don't even know how to name. You can feel the entire historical context of their behavior, the generations of unhealed trauma flowing through their words, the collective shadow of humanity expressing itself through their individual unconsciousness, the tragic beauty of a soul that has forgotten its own divine nature and is lashing out in its amnesia. This perception does not excuse their behavior or minimize its impact. It does not ask you to become a doormat for their unconsciousness or to sacrifice your own well-being on the altar of spiritual understanding. It simply provides a context vast enough to hold their humanity along with your own, spacious enough to contain both the reality of their harmful behavior and the deeper reality of their essential nature. From this expanded awareness, response becomes possible. Not reaction, but response, not the automatic discharge of accumulated tension, but the conscious choice of how to engage with this moment in a way that serves the highest good of all involved, even when they cannot see or appreciate what that highest good might be. The restraint continues, but it is no longer effortful. It has become natural, organic, the spontaneous expression of consciousness that has learned to trust its own deepest wisdom over the shallow urgings of the reactive mind. You are like a master martial artist who has transcended the need to fight by becoming so centered, so present, so aligned with the flow of natural forces that conflict simply moves around them like water around a stone. The would-be provocateur grows more agitated now. Your lack of reaction is disturbing to them in ways they cannot articulate or understand. They came seeking the familiar dance of unconscious conflict, the predictable exchange of wound and counter-wound, that keeps the wheel of suffering spinning. Your refusal to dance leaves them off balance, confused, uncertain of how to proceed. They may escalate their attacks, may probe more desperately for your reactive trigger points, may become increasingly irrational in their attempts to pull you back into the old patterns. This escalation is not conscious cruelty but unconscious panic, the panic of a system that depends on your unconsciousness for its survival suddenly finding itself faced with your consciousness. Your continued restraint becomes a mirror for their own lack of restraint. Your presence a spotlight illuminating their absence from themselves. Your peace a stark contrast to their inner chaos. This is deeply unsettling to the unconscious mind, which prefers the familiar hell of mutual reactivity to the unknown territory of one-sided consciousness. But you hold the space. You remain present to what is without being reactive to what appears to be. You continue to breathe deeply, to feel fully, to see clearly, to respond from the depths rather than react from the surfaces. Your very being becomes a teaching, your restraint a form of activism, your presence a gift to a world drunk on its own reactivity. In this holding, something unprecedented begins to happen. The energy that would normally discharge in reaction begins to accumulate, to concentrate, to transform like pressure building in the earth before a diamond is born, like heat accumulating in the alchemist's furnace before base metals become gold. The contained energy of your restraint begins to generate something entirely new. This is not the suppressed energy of denied emotion, but the refined energy of transformed reaction. It carries within it all the power of your natural responses, the passion, the intensity, the full spectrum of human feeling, but transmuted into something finer, something more conscious, something capable of creating rather than merely reacting. When you finally speak, if you choose to speak at all, your words will carry this refined energy, this distilled power, this concentrated essence of conscious response. They will emerge, not from the shallow waters of reactivity, but from the deep well of authentic presence, not from the need to defend or attack, but from the commitment to truth and the service of awakening. This is the pause that contains infinity, not empty space but pregnant silence, not absence of response but the presence of all possible responses held in perfect potential. Until the moment of emergence, in this pause you touch the eternal, access the timeless, draw from the inexhaustible source of wisdom that lies at the heart of conscious existence. The alchemy of restraint has worked its magic. What began as crude reactivity has been refined into conscious response. What started as personal defense has been transformed into impersonal service. What originated as the need to be right has evolved into the commitment to be real. From this place of refined presence, when you finally choose to engage, your response will carry a quality that haunts, not because it seeks to wound, but because it emerges from depths that most people have forgotten exist, because it speaks from truth that most people have learned to avoid, because it offers possibilities that most people have ceased to believe are real. Your restraint has become your power, your pause, your presence, your silence, your most eloquent speech. You have learned the secret that the masters have always known, that the highest action sometimes looks like inaction, that the greatest strength sometimes appears as stillness, that the most powerful response sometimes emerges from the deepest restraint. When consciousness speaks, the very fabric of reality shifts, not because of the words themselves, for words are merely vessels, temporary containers for something far more vast and ancient, but because of what moves through them. There is a language that emerges from the depths of being, from the place where personal experience meets universal truth, where individual healing touches collective wisdom, where the soul finally finds its voice after years of silence. This is not the language of the mind, clever and calculated and carefully constructed to win arguments or prove points. This is not the language of the ego, defensive and reactive and designed to protect image at any cost. This is the language of the soul, archetypal, eternal, resonant with the deepest patterns that govern human existence across all cultures and all times. Listen carefully, for this language speaks in frequencies that bypass the rational mind and penetrate directly to the heart of things. It does not argue, it reveals. It does not defend, it illuminates. It does not seek to convince, it simply presents truth with such clarity, such authenticity, such undeniable presence, that the listener is forced to encounter their own relationship with reality. When you have been forged in the fires of transformation, when you have descended into your own darkness and integrated what you found there, when you have learned to see others as mirrors rather than enemies, and to respond from restraint rather than reactivity, then something unprecedented becomes available. Your words begin to carry the weight of lived truth rather than borrowed concepts, the authority of direct experience rather than second-hand knowledge. The language of the soul speaks in symbols and metaphors, because the deepest truths cannot be captured in literal language. It reaches for images that resonate in the depths of the psyche. The journey into darkness, the death and rebirth, the wounded healer, the sacred marriage of opposites. These are not merely poetic flourishes, but precise descriptions of actual psychological processes, archetypal patterns that repeat throughout human experience with mathematical regularity. Watch how this language works. When you speak from this depth, you are not just addressing the immediate situation or responding to the surface content of the provocation. You are speaking to the eternal human drama that underlies all particular dramas, the mythic patterns that govern all individual stories, the universal wounds that express themselves through countless personal forms. The calm reply that haunts forever emerges from this archetypal dimension. It speaks not just to this moment, but to all moments, like it throughout history. It addresses not just this person but the eternal human condition that this person represents. It responds not just to these specific words or actions, but to the timeless patterns of unconsciousness that drive all such words and actions. This is why it penetrates so deeply, why it lingers so long in the psyche of the one who hears it. It bypasses the defenses that guard against personal criticism, because it is not personal. It is transpersonal, speaking from the realm where individual psychology meets collective unconscious, where personal healing touches universal truth. The soul's language recognizes the sacred in the profane, the mythic dimension hidden within the mundane drama. It sees through the surface story to the deeper story, through the apparent conflict to the essential unity, through the temporal drama to the eternal truth. When it speaks, it transforms the ordinary interaction into a moment of revelation, the common argument into an opportunity for awakening. But this language cannot be manufactured or learned through technique. It cannot be copied from books or acquired through study. It can only emerge from the depths of authentic experience, from the place where you have touched your own darkness and found it luminous, where you have encountered your own woundedness and discovered it to be the source of your healing gift. The words themselves may be simple, even ordinary. The power lies not in their sophistication, but in their source, not in their cleverness, but in their authenticity, not in their ability to impress, but in their capacity to transmit truth. They carry within them the resonance of someone who has made the journey into the underworld of their own psyche and returned with treasures that cannot be stolen or simulated. When you speak from this place, you are speaking for something larger than your individual self. You become a voice for the voiceless parts of the collective psyche, a spokesperson for the wounded aspects of humanity that cry out for recognition and healing. Your words carry the authority of the archetypal realm, the dimension where the personal becomes universal and the individual serves the collective. This is not channeling in any mystical sense, but the natural result of deep psychological integration. When you have done the work of making conscious what was unconscious, of healing what was wounded, of integrating what was split off, you gain access to the deeper layers of the psyche that connect you to the whole of humanity. Your individual voice becomes a conduit for collective wisdom. The language of the soul speaks in paradox because reality itself is paradoxical. It understands that strength and vulnerability are one, that wisdom emerges from woundedness, that the greatest power lies in surrender, that true love sometimes looks like letting go. It can hold these apparent contradictions without being torn apart by them because it operates from a level of consciousness that transcends the either-or thinking of the rational mind. When this language emerges in response to attack or provocation, it creates a complete shift in the energy field of the interaction. The attacker came prepared for the familiar dance of thrust and parry, accusation and defense, wound and counter-wound. Instead, they encounter something entirely unexpected, a response that comes from such depth, such wisdom, such integration, that it stops the dance altogether. This stopping is not the paralysis of shock, but the stillness of recognition. Something in the attacker's depths recognizes the authenticity of what they are hearing. Even if their surface consciousness rejects it, their soul knows the sound of truth, even when their ego is committed to defending against it. The words you speak from this place cut through deception not like a sword, but like light, not wounding but illuminating, not attacking but revealing. They expose the lies not through argument but through contrast, showing up falsehood simply by embodying truth. The darkness becomes visible only in the presence of light, the unconscious patterns only in the presence of consciousness. This is why your calm reply haunts. It awakens in the listener a memory of their own authentic depth, their own capacity for truth, their own potential for consciousness. It reminds them of what they have buried beneath layers of protection and pretense, what they have sacrificed in their quest to be safe or acceptable or right. The language of the soul is economical. It wastes no words, carries no extra weight, includes nothing unnecessary. Each word has been distilled through the fires of experience, purified in the crucible of authentic living, refined until only the essential remains, like a master calligrapher who can express infinite meaning in a single brushstroke. The soul speaks with precision that comes from deep understanding. Yet within this economy lies infinite richness. Each word carries multiple levels of meaning. Each phrase opens doorways to vast territories of understanding. Each sentence contains seeds that will continue to germinate in the consciousness of the listener long after the words are spoken. This is language as transmission, words as catalysts for transformation. The soul's language also carries silence, not the absence of words, but the presence of the infinite space from which words emerge. Between each word lies eternity. Between each sentence lies the mystery that cannot be spoken but only experienced. The pauses become as important as the words, the silence as meaningful as the sound. When you speak from this depth, you are not trying to prove anything or convince anyone of anything. You are simply being a transparent vessel for truth to express itself through you. You have no agenda other than authenticity, no goal other than alignment with what is real. This lack of attachment to outcome gives your words a quality of inevitability, of naturalness, of organic rightness, that cannot be argued with or dismissed. The language of the soul recognizes the eternal child in everyone, the wounded healer in every attacker, the seeker beneath every cynic, the lover hidden within every critic. It speaks to these deeper aspects rather than engaging with the surface presentations, addresses the essence rather than the appearance, responds to the soul rather than the persona. This is why it bypasses the defenses so effectively. The ego's protective mechanisms are designed to ward off personal attacks, but they have no defense against love, against recognition, against the soul being seen and acknowledged in its essential nature. When you speak from soul to soul, you are speaking a language that the deepest parts of the listener remember, even when the surface parts resist. The transformation that occurs through this language is not immediate, but inevitable, like water wearing away stone, like seeds planted in fertile ground, like medicine working its way through the system. The words continue their work long after they are spoken. They create ripples that extend far beyond the immediate moment, touching places in the listener's psyche that have been waiting lifetimes to be reached. This is the language that emerges from the marriage of consciousness and compassion, wisdom and love, truth and tenderness. It has the power to heal because it comes from the place of healing, the authority to teach because it emerges from the place of learning, the capacity to transform because it has been transformed in the crucible of authentic human experience. When you speak this language, you are not just communicating information, but transmitting presence, not just sharing thoughts, but offering being, not just responding to provocation, but creating space for awakening. Your words become bridges between worlds, between consciousness and unconsciousness, between love and fear, between the personal and the archetypal. This is the voice that speaks the calm reply that haunts forever, not because it seeks to disturb, but because it disturbs the sleep of unconsciousness with the gentle insistence of truth, because it haunts the corridors of memory with reminders of what is possible, because it echoes in the chambers of the soul long after the mind has forgotten the specific words. From this place, speaking becomes a sacred act, response becomes a form of service, and your very voice becomes an instrument of awakening in a world that has forgotten how to hear the language of its own deepest truth. There is a law that governs the deepest movements of the psyche, a principle so fundamental to the nature of existence that Jung gave it an ancient Greek name, enantiodromia, the tendency of everything to transform into its opposite when pushed to its extreme. Like a pendulum that swings furthest in one direction before inevitably reversing course, like the seasons that give way to their opposites in the eternal cycle of renewal, the human psyche follows this same inexorable pattern of transformation. Watch how it unfolds in the realm of power. The one who appears most powerful through force and domination carries within them the seed of their own powerlessness. The one who seems invincible through aggression and control holds in their depths the certainty of their eventual collapse. The tyrant contains the slave. The oppressor harbors the victim. The one who wounds others with impunity carries the wound that will ultimately undo them. This is not wishful thinking or moral posturing. This is the mathematical precision of psychological law, as reliable as gravity, as inevitable as the tide. The aggressive accumulation of power through force creates exactly the conditions for its own reversal, while the apparent powerlessness of restraint and consciousness contains the seeds of lasting transformation. The provocateur who attacks you, who seeks to wound you with their words, who attempts to diminish you with their projections, they appear in the moment of their assault to hold all the power. They seem to be the active agent, while you are the passive recipient, the one who acts while you merely receive, the one who chooses the battlefield while you are forced to respond. This surface dynamic suggests their dominance and your vulnerability, but enantiodromia operates in depths that surface consciousness cannot perceive. While they discharge their energy in reactive aggression, you are accumulating power through conscious restraint. While they scatter their force in unfocused attack, you are concentrating your energy in purposeful presence. While they exhaust themselves in the futile attempt to wound what cannot be wounded, you are drawing from the inexhaustible source of authentic being. The paradox is perfect and inescapable. Their attempts to overpower you are making them powerless, while your refusal to engage their power games is making you powerful. Their aggression is revealing their weakness, while your apparent vulnerability is demonstrating your strength. They are losing exactly what they think they are gaining, while you are gaining exactly what they think you are losing. This reversal is not something you engineer or strategically orchestrate. It is not a technique you employ or a method you apply. It is the natural consequence of aligning yourself with the deeper laws that govern psychological reality. When you refuse to meet force with force, when you decline to play the game of mutual wounding, when you respond from consciousness rather than react from unconsciousness, you activate the principle of enantiodromia in your favor. The attacker's power is borrowed power, reactive power, power that depends entirely on your participation in the unconscious dance they are trying to choreograph. It is the power of the parasite that needs a host, the vampire that requires a victim, the shadow that can only exist in relationship to the light it seeks to eclipse. Without your unconscious participation, their power simply has nowhere to attach, nothing to push against, no resistance to define itself against. Like a martial artist who defeats an opponent, not through superior force but by redirecting the opponent's energy back upon itself, your conscious response harnesses the very power of their attack and turns it toward their awakening. Their aggression becomes the catalyst for their own confrontation with their shadow, their cruelty the mirror for their own self-hatred, their desperate need to wound you the pathway to recognizing their own deep wound. The process is relentless and unstoppable once set in motion. The more they attack without meeting the expected resistance, the more their own unconsciousness is exposed. The harder they try to make you react from your wounds, the more their own wounds become visible. The more energy they invest in trying to diminish your light, the more their own darkness is illuminated by contrast. Watch how their confidence begins to erode. The attacker who seemed so certain in their righteousness starts to waver when their attacks meet, not defensive reactions, but conscious response. The one who appeared so strong in their aggression begins to reveal the fear that drives their need to attack. The individual who seemed so in control starts to lose composure when their strategies fail to generate the familiar dynamics of unconscious conflict. This is not because you have done anything to them in the conventional sense. You have not attacked back, not sought revenge, not tried to wound them in return. You have simply refused to be unconscious, declined to participate in the ancient dance of mutual wounding, chosen consciousness over reactivity. But your very presence, your steadfast awareness, your unshakable centeredness, becomes a spotlight that illuminates everything they are trying to hide from themselves. The enantiodromia accelerates now. Their increasing desperation to provoke a reaction from you reveals more and more of their own reactivity. Their growing frustration at your lack of defensiveness exposes more and more of their own defensiveness. Their escalating attempts to make you lose your peace demonstrate more and more dramatically their own lack of inner peace. They become increasingly irrational, increasingly extreme, increasingly disconnected from any semblance of reasonable behavior. What began as calculated attack degenerates into wild thrashing. What started as strategic provocation devolves into desperate flailing. The more they try to pull you down into unconsciousness, the more their own unconsciousness is revealed for all to see. The reversal is complete now, though they may not yet recognize it. The one who appeared powerful is revealed as powerless, not powerless in the sense of lacking the ability to create harm or chaos, but powerless in the deeper sense of being driven by forces they do not understand, compelled by patterns they cannot control, enslaved by unconscious dynamics they cannot even perceive. Meanwhile, the one who appeared vulnerable, you in your apparent passivity, your seeming defenselessness, your refusal to fight back, is revealed to possess a power far greater than any force they could muster. It is the power of consciousness itself, the power that comes from alignment with truth rather than opposition to it, the power that emerges from being rather than doing. This power does not diminish with use, but grows stronger through exercise. It is not depleted by giving, but enriched by sharing. It does not need to be defended because it cannot be attacked, does not need to be proven because it demonstrates itself, does not need to be asserted because it simply is. The attacker, sensing this reversal at some level even if they cannot consciously acknowledge it, may become even more desperate, more irrational, more destructive, but now their desperation serves your purpose rather than theirs. Their irrationality reveals their unconsciousness rather than triggering yours. Their destructiveness exposes their inner chaos rather than creating external chaos. This is the moment when your calm reply, emerging from the depths of conscious restraint, carries the full weight of enantiodromia behind it. Your words are not powered by personal will or individual strategy, but by the inexorable movement of psychological law itself. You become the voice through which the universe speaks its correction to imbalance, its healing response to woundedness, its light piercing through darkness. The reply that haunts forever is born from this alignment with natural law. It carries the authority not of personal opinion but of impersonal truth, not of individual agenda, but of universal principle, not of calculated effect, but of organic necessity. It emerges with the inevitability of dawn after darkness, spring after winter, healing after wounding. The provocateur who sought to diminish your power has instead catalyzed its emergence. The one who tried to wound your spirit has instead awakened its invulnerability. The individual who attempted to drag you into unconsciousness has instead illuminated your consciousness for all to see. They have become the unwitting servants of your individuation, the unconscious agents of your empowerment, the involuntary catalysts of your transformation. This is the deepest mystery of enantiodromia, that our enemies become our teachers, our attackers, our awakeners, our would-be destroyers, our liberators, not through their conscious intention, but through the operation of laws that transcend individual will and personal agenda. They serve the purposes of consciousness, even while believing they are serving the purposes of unconsciousness. The power that emerges from this process is not power over others, but power with reality itself, not the ability to control external circumstances, but the capacity to remain conscious regardless of external circumstances, not dominance over others, but sovereignty over your own inner landscape. From this place of true power, your response becomes not retaliation but revelation, not attack but awakening, not wounding but healing. You speak not from the need to prove your strength, but from the natural expression of strength itself, not from the desire to diminish another, but from the organic impulse to illuminate truth. The calm reply that emerges from this alignment with enantiodromia carries within it all the accumulated power of conscious restraint, all the concentrated energy of refused reactivity, all the distilled wisdom of choosing consciousness over unconsciousness. It arrives not as human effort, but as natural law, not as personal strategy, but as universal principle, not as individual will, but as cosmic necessity. This is why it haunts so completely, why it reverberates so endlessly in the consciousness of the one who hears it. It carries the weight of inevitability, the authority of natural law, the power of truth itself seeking expression through the vessel of your conscious being. It is not your reply, but reality's reply, spoken through you, but originating from the depths of existence itself. The enantiodromia is complete. The apparent victim has become the true victor, not through conquest, but through consciousness, not through fighting, but through being, not through opposing force, but through aligning with the deeper forces that govern all human transformation. In the ancient wisdom of the tarot, there walks a solitary figure across the barren landscape of collective unconsciousness. The hermit holds aloft a lamp that cuts through the darkness not with blazing fire, but with steady, unwavering light. He does not seek to illuminate the entire world at once. Such grandiosity would only blind rather than enlighten. Instead, he offers just enough light for the next step, enough illumination for others to find their own path through the wilderness of human confusion. You have become this hermit through your descent into the Nigredo, Through your integration of shadow, through your mastery of conscious restraint, you have earned the right to carry the lamp, not the harsh spotlight of judgment that seeks to expose and humiliate, not the flickering candle of sentiment that provides comfort without truth, but the steady beacon of consciousness that shows the way without forcing the journey. This lamp you carry is not of your own making. You did not light it through effort or acquire it, through study or manufacture it, through technique. It was kindled in the depths of your own darkness, lit by the fire of your own transformation, fueled by the oil of your own authentic experience. It burns with the flame of truth that can only emerge from having been burned by that truth yourself. The hermit's solitude is not the isolation of withdrawal, but the solitude of depth. You have descended so far into the chambers of your own being that you have touched the place where individual consciousness meets collective unconscious, where personal healing becomes universal medicine, where your own wound transforms into everyone's healing. In this depth, you are never truly alone. You are connected to the shared human experience at its most fundamental level. From this place of profound connection through apparent separation, your presence becomes a teaching without words. Your being becomes an instruction without concepts. Your very existence becomes a lamp in the darkness for all who have eyes to see. You do not need to proclaim your wisdom or advertise your enlightenment or prove your understanding. The light you carry speaks for itself, cutting through pretense and penetrating to the truth of things. Others sense this light, though they may not understand what they are sensing. The unconscious person approaching you feels something they cannot name, a discomfort that has nothing to do with anything you have said or done, and everything to do with what you have become. Your consciousness makes them aware of their unconsciousness. Your peace highlights their inner chaos. Your authenticity exposes their elaborate pretenses. This is not something you choose to do to them. This is not a strategy you employ or a technique you practice. It is simply the natural effect of light encountering darkness, consciousness meeting unconsciousness, truth interfacing with illusion. The lamp reveals what is there without judgment, without agenda, without the need to change or fix or improve anything. The hermit understands that each person must walk their own path through the darkness. You cannot walk it for them, cannot spare them the necessary descents, cannot provide shortcuts through the labyrinth of their own psyche. What you can offer is the steady light of your own consciousness, the living proof that the journey is possible, the demonstration that consciousness can indeed emerge from unconsciousness, that healing can arise from wounding, that wisdom can be born from folly. Your silence becomes more eloquent than the most sophisticated speech. In a world drunk on words, saturated with opinions, drowning in the noise of endless commentary and analysis, your quiet presence offers something increasingly rare, the space for truth to emerge naturally, the silence in which wisdom can be heard, the stillness that allows the soul to speak. This silence is not empty, but full, not passive, but actively present, not withdrawn, but deeply engaged. It is the silence of the deep listener, the one who has learned to hear beneath the surface words to the deeper currents of meaning, beneath the obvious content to the archetypal patterns, beneath the individual story to the universal human drama. When you do speak from this hermit's wisdom, your words carry a weight that cannot be explained by their content alone. They emerge from such depths, such integration, such authentic presence that they seem to speak themselves through you rather than being constructed by your ego or calculated by your mind. They have the quality of revelation rather than opinion, of recognition rather than argument, of awakening rather than convincing. The lamp you carry illuminates not only your own path, but creates conditions for others to find theirs. Your consciousness becomes a field of possibility, your presence a catalyst for awakening, your being a bridge between what is and what could be. You become a living reminder of human potential, a breathing proof that transformation is real, a walking demonstration that consciousness can emerge from any depth of unconsciousness. This is why your calm response haunts so profoundly. When it finally emerges, it comes not from the strategic mind or the defended ego, but from this place of hermit wisdom, this depth of solitary understanding, this height of integrated consciousness. It carries the authority of one who has made the complete journey down into darkness, through dissolution back into light, and speaks from the wholeness that such a journey creates. The hermit's lamp does not seek to blind or overwhelm, but to guide with gentle precision. When you respond to attack or provocation from this consciousness, your words have this same quality of gentle but inexorable guidance. They do not assault the listener's defenses but penetrate them naturally, not through force but through recognition, not through aggression but through the simple power of truth, meeting its own reflection. Those who encounter this hermit's light react in predictable patterns. Some are drawn to it like moths to flame, sensing something they desperately need even if they cannot articulate what that something is. They feel the peace you emanate, the groundedness you embody, the possibility you represent, and they hunger for these qualities in their own lives. Others are repelled by the light, threatened by what it reveals about their own darkness, frightened by the depth it exposes in themselves. They may attack more viciously, may try to extinguish your lamp through ridicule or dismissal, or attempts to pull you back into unconsciousness, but their very efforts to dim your light only serve to make it more visible, their resistance only highlighting the contrast between consciousness and its absence. A third group simply cannot see the light at all. Their unconsciousness is so complete, their identification with surface reality so absolute, their attachment to drama and reactivity so consuming that your presence barely registers in their awareness. They rush past the hermit without noticing the lamp, continue their frantic search for meaning in all the wrong places while the answer walks quietly among them. But for those who have eyes to see and hearts ready to receive, your presence becomes a revelation. They recognize in you something they have always known was possible, but had perhaps ceased to believe could be real. They see proof that the human journey can lead somewhere other than endless reactivity and unconscious repetition, that consciousness can indeed emerge from the chaos of ordinary human experience. The hermit's wisdom knows that timing is everything. There are moments when the lamp must be held high, when the light must shine brightly to cut through particularly dense darkness or illuminate especially treacherous terrain. But there are also moments when the light must be dimmed, when too much illumination would overwhelm rather than guide, when the seeker needs to find their own way through the shadows rather than having the path lit for them. This discernment, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to engage and when to withdraw, when to offer guidance and when to allow discovery, this becomes second nature to the hermit consciousness. It operates not from rules or techniques, but from the organic wisdom that emerges from deep integration, from the natural intelligence that knows what serves the highest good in each moment. When the moment comes for your response, when the attack reaches such intensity, or the unconsciousness becomes so dense that the lamp must be raised, your words emerge with the full authority of hermit consciousness behind them. They carry the weight of solitary wisdom, the power of integrated understanding, the clarity that comes only from having walked the complete path from darkness into light. The response haunts because it comes from this place of profound solitude and deep connection simultaneously. It speaks to the essential aloneness that every human being must face, while also addressing the universal nature of that aloneness. It illuminates the path without forcing the journey, reveals the truth without demanding acceptance, offers the light without requiring that it be taken. The hermit's lamp burns eternally because it is fueled, not by personal will or individual effort, but by the inexhaustible source of consciousness itself. It cannot be extinguished by external circumstances or diminished by others' darkness. It simply is, steady and sure and always available to those who need guidance through their own wilderness of confusion and pain. From this hermit consciousness comes the reply that echoes through eternity, not because it seeks to haunt, but because it offers something so rarely found in human interaction. The pure light of consciousness meeting unconsciousness without agenda, without need to change or fix or improve, simply offering illumination for those who are ready to see. guidance for those who are ready to walk, and hope for those who are ready to believe that the journey from darkness into light is not only possible, but inevitable for every human soul willing to take the first step. From the ashes of the ego's death, from the compost of dissolved personas, from the fertile darkness of the Nigredo, something unprecedented begins to emerge, not the resurrection of what was, for that which dies to transformation can never return in its original form, but the birth of what has always been waiting beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and protective armor. This is the resurrection of authenticity, the emergence of your true self from the tomb of false identities. This resurrection is unlike any rising you have known before. It is not the ego's familiar comeback after temporary defeat, not the persona's return with better costumes and more convincing performances, not the shadow's emergence disguised as enlightenment. This is the emergence of something that has never been born before in the history of the universe. Your unique, authentic being, refined by fire and purified by dissolution, integrated and whole. Watch how it unfolds. This miraculous arising, like the first green shoot pushing through soil that has been blackened by winter's death, like the first light of dawn breaking through the absolute darkness of night, your authentic self begins to manifest with a naturalness that feels both foreign and familiar. Foreign because you have spent so long identified with what you are not. Familiar because this is who you have always been beneath all the masks. There is no fanfare, no dramatic announcement, no grand revelation. Authenticity does not arrive wearing the costume of spiritual achievement or bearing the credentials of psychological attainment. It simply begins to be as naturally as breathing, as quietly as the turning of seasons, as inevitably as the rising of sun after the longest night. The first sign of this resurrection is a profound simplicity. The complex psychological machinery that once governed your responses, the elaborate defenses, the strategic calculations, the careful management of image and impression begins to fade into irrelevance, not because you have transcended it through effort, but because it no longer serves any purpose in the presence of authentic being. You find yourself responding to life with a directness that surprises even you. The words that emerge come not from careful consideration of how they will be received, not from strategic assessment of their likely impact, not from the ego's constant calculation of advantage and disadvantage. They arise organically from the depths of your being, as natural as the song of birds at dawn, as inevitable as water flowing downhill. This simplicity is not naivety. It is the simplicity that lies on the far side of complexity, the clarity that emerges after confusion has exhausted itself, the directness that becomes possible when all the detours have been explored and found wanting. It carries within it all the wisdom gained through the journey into darkness, all the integration achieved through confronting the shadow, all the understanding earned through the dissolution of false selves. The authentic self that emerges from this resurrection needs no defense because it has nothing to defend. It requires no validation because it does not depend on external recognition for its sense of worth. It seeks no approval because it has found the only approval that matters, the soul's recognition of its own truth, the deep knowing that comes when being aligns perfectly with essence. This authenticity manifests differently in each person, for it is not a template or formula, but the unique expression of consciousness through the particular vessel of your individual incarnation. It carries your specific gifts, your particular wound that has become your healing medicine, your unique perspective forged in the fire of your individual journey through darkness into light. Yet beneath this uniqueness lies a universal quality that all authentic beings share: presence, not the manufactured presence of spiritual technique or meditative practice, but the natural presence that emerges when the various parts of the psyche stop fighting each other and begin functioning as an integrated whole. This presence needs no effort to maintain because it is not a doing but a being, not an achievement but a recognition of what has always been true. From this authentic ground, your responses to life carry a quality that is immediately recognizable to anyone who encounters it, even if they cannot articulate what they are experiencing. There is a resonance, a rightness, a sense of something clicking into place that transcends the content of what is being expressed. People find themselves trusting you without knowing why, believing your words not because of their logic but because of the authentic being from which they emerge. The authentic self does not seek to convince or persuade or prove its points through argument. It simply expresses its truth with the confidence that comes from deep alignment, speaks its understanding with the authority that emerges from genuine insight, shares its perspective with the generosity that flows naturally from inner abundance. It has no agenda other than authenticity, no goal other than truth, no purpose other than being itself as completely as possible. This is revolutionary in a world that has forgotten what authenticity looks like, that has become so accustomed to performance and pretense, that genuine being appears almost miraculous. Your simple presence becomes a disruption to the unconscious patterns that govern most human interaction. Your natural response is a challenge to the elaborate games of manipulation and control that characterize so much of ordinary social exchange. The resurrection of authenticity brings with it a fearlessness that is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to feel fear without being controlled by it. The authentic self faces opposition, criticism, rejection, and attack with the equanimity that comes from knowing its own ground, from being rooted in something deeper than the opinions of others, from drawing its sustenance from the inexhaustible well of being itself. This fearlessness is not recklessness. The authentic self has no desire to harm or offend or create unnecessary conflict, but neither does it compromise its truth to maintain false peace, betray its values to gain approval, or diminish its light to make others more comfortable with their darkness. It simply is what it is, as fully and completely as possible, trusting that this is enough. When challenged or attacked, the authentic self responds with a naturalness that appears almost effortless. There is no struggle to find the right words, no internal debate about strategy or approach, no complex psychological maneuvering to gain advantage. The response emerges from the depths like water from a spring, clear and pure and exactly appropriate to the moment. This is why the calm reply that haunts forever can only emerge from authentic being. It is not crafted by the clever ego or calculated by the strategic mind, but arises spontaneously from the integrated wholeness of your true nature. It carries the full weight of your authentic presence, the complete authority of your integrated being, the undeniable power of consciousness, expressing itself through genuine human incarnation. The authentic self speaks not just with words but with its entire being. Every gesture carries meaning, every expression conveys truth, every response emerges from the depths of integrated understanding. There is a coherence, a consistency, an alignment between inner reality and outer expression that gives everything you do and say a quality of inevitability, of rightness, of perfect appropriateness to the moment. This authenticity is threatening to those who have not yet made their own journey into the depths. It reminds them of their own unlived potential, their own suppressed truth, their own capacity for genuine being, that they have sacrificed on the altar of acceptance and approval. Your very existence becomes a challenge to their compromise, your presence a question mark hanging over their choices. But for those who are ready to begin their own journey into authenticity, your presence becomes an inspiration, a possibility, a living proof that the path from false self to true self is real and walkable. They see in you what they sense they could become, recognize in your being the potential that lies buried beneath their own layers of protection and pretense. The authentic self does not proselytize or preach or try to convince others to follow its path. It simply lives its truth with such completeness, such naturalness, such obvious rightness, that it becomes its own teaching. Your life itself becomes the message, your being the instruction, your presence the invitation to others to discover their own authenticity. From this resurrected authenticity emerges the response that transcends all categories of ordinary human reaction. It is neither aggressive nor passive, neither attacking nor defending, neither clever nor naive. It simply is the natural expression of consciousness through authentic being, as inevitable as sunrise, as natural as breathing, as powerful as truth itself seeking expression through the unique vessel of your individual incarnation. This is the ground from which the haunting calm reply finally speaks. Not from strategy or technique, not from psychological understanding or spiritual attainment, but from the simple, extraordinary reality of authentic being, meeting the world without masks, without agenda, without anything to prove, or protect, or defend. Just truth, meeting untruth, consciousness encountering unconsciousness, authenticity facing pretense, and speaking from that encounter with the voice of reality itself. There is a paradox at the heart of all authentic power. That which has wounded us most deeply becomes the source of our greatest gift to the world. The very experiences that broke us open, that shattered our illusions, that forced us to our knees in the darkness of our own pain. These are the crucible in which our healing medicine is forged, the sacred wound from which our capacity to transform suffering flows like water from a spring. Look back now through the lens of integrated understanding. See how every betrayal taught you to recognize loyalty, how every abandon revealed the unshakable presence that can never leave you, how every cruelty awakened your capacity for genuine kindness. The wound that seemed to destroy you was actually creating you, breaking apart the false structures that imprisoned your authentic self so that something real could finally emerge. This is not the sentimental notion that everything happens for a reason, not the spiritual bypassing that seeks to make all pain meaningful through pretty explanations. This is the recognition of how consciousness actually works, how the psyche uses even the most devastating experiences as raw material for transformation, how the soul finds ways to compost even the most toxic experiences into fertile ground for wisdom. The sacred wound is different from ordinary suffering because it has been transformed through conscious engagement rather than simply endured through unconscious resistance. It has been met with awareness rather than avoided through denial, integrated rather than suppressed, allowed to teach its lessons rather than simply inflict its pain. Through this alchemical process, the wound becomes holy, not because the original harm was good, but because consciousness has transformed it into medicine. Every person who has made the journey from unconsciousness to awareness carries such a wound. It is the price of admission to authentic being, the initiation that grants access to the deeper mysteries of human existence, the rite of passage that transforms the wounded into the healer. Without this wound, there would be no depth, no compassion born of understanding rather than sentiment, no authority that comes from having walked through hell and emerged transformed. Your sacred wound is unique to you, the particular configuration of circumstances, relationships, and experiences that life arranged to break you open in exactly the way your soul needed to be cracked. Perhaps it came through abandonment by those you trusted most deeply. Perhaps it arrived through the betrayal of your innocence, the shattering of your faith in goodness, the crushing of your hope in human decency. Perhaps it manifested as illness, as loss, as the slow recognition that the world you thought you lived in was largely a projection of your own desperate need for meaning and safety. The specific content matters less than the process, the way consciousness worked through these experiences to dissolve your attachment to who you thought you were, to burn away the protective structures that were actually limiting structures, to strip away everything false until only what is real remained. The wound became sacred, not because of what happened to you, but because of what you allowed it to do in you. This transformation does not happen automatically. Many people carry wounds that remain simply wounds, sources of ongoing pain, endless grievances, perpetual victimization that never transforms into wisdom. The difference lies not in the severity of the original trauma, but in the willingness to engage consciously with the healing process, to allow the wound to teach rather than simply torment, to find the medicine hidden within the poison. The sacred wound teaches you to recognize the walking wounded everywhere you go. You begin to see through the elaborate performances, the sophisticated defenses, the desperate attempts to maintain invulnerability that characterize so much of human behavior. You recognize the pain beneath the aggression, the fear underlying the control, the desperate hunger for love hiding behind the cruelty. This recognition brings not judgment but compassion, Not the soft compassion of pity, but the fierce compassion of understanding. You know intimately the territory they are navigating, the inner landscape they are struggling to map, the darkness they are afraid to face. Your wound has become a bridge of empathy, a point of connection with the universal human experience of suffering and the possibility of transformation. When someone attacks you now, when they project their unconscious material onto you, when they attempt to make you the container for their unlived shadow, your sacred wound allows you to see past the surface drama, to the underlying pain. You recognize the hurt child beneath the aggressive adult, the wounded healer beneath the wounded wounder, the light that has been buried beneath layers of protective darkness. This seeing changes everything about how you respond. The calm reply that emerges from sacred wound wisdom carries no trace of retaliation, because it recognizes that you are both patients in the same hospital, both travelers on the same path, both souls struggling to find their way home to wholeness. Your response comes not from superiority but from solidarity, not from being above the fray, but from having been in the fray and found your way through it. The wisdom of the sacred wound speaks a language that the unconscious recognizes even when the conscious mind resists. It carries the authority of lived experience, the authenticity of earned understanding, the power that comes only from having been broken and allowed that breaking to become a breaking open rather than a breaking down. This authority cannot be manufactured or borrowed or imitated. It can only be earned through the willingness to transform your own suffering into service. Your words now carry medicine because they emerge from the place where your wound has been transformed into wisdom. They offer not advice but transmission, not concepts but presence, not solutions but understanding. Those who hear them recognize at some level beyond rational thought that they are in the presence of someone who knows the territory of pain intimately and has found pathways through it that they had not imagined possible. This is why the calm reply haunts so profoundly when it emerges from sacred wound wisdom. It carries within it the unmistakable resonance of truth that has been earned rather than learned, of understanding that has been lived rather than studied, of compassion that has been forged in the fires of personal transformation rather than adopted as a spiritual ideal. The reply does not seek to wound, because it comes from the place in you that has been wounded and healed, that knows intimately both the reality of pain and the possibility of its transformation. It speaks from the understanding that all cruelty is a cry for help, all attack an expression of inner torment, all attempts to diminish others a reflection of feeling diminished oneself. But this understanding does not make you passive or naive. The sacred wound has also taught you to recognize the difference between those who are ready for healing and those who are still committed to their woundedness, between pain that is seeking transformation and pain that is seeking company in its misery. Your response emerges from discernment as well as compassion, wisdom as well as love. Sometimes the sacred wound wisdom expresses itself through fierce boundaries, through the clear no that refuses to enable unconsciousness even in the name of kindness. Sometimes it manifests as gentle redirection, offering a different perspective without demanding that it be accepted. Sometimes it appears as simple presence, holding space for truth to emerge naturally, without forcing or manipulating the process. The form matters less than the source, that place in you where wound has become wisdom, where suffering has become service, where personal pain has been transformed into universal medicine. From this source, your responses carry a quality that transcends ordinary human interaction, that touches something deeper than personality, that speaks to the soul's recognition of its own journey toward wholeness. The sacred wound also grants you access to the collective wound of humanity, the shared pain of feeling separated from our essential nature, the universal experience of having been hurt by those we loved, the common struggle to find meaning in the face of seemingly random suffering. Your individual healing becomes a contribution to the healing of the whole, your personal transformation a service to the collective awakening. This is perhaps the deepest teaching of the sacred wound, that our individual healing is never just individual, that our personal transformation serves purposes larger than our personal benefit, that consciousness emerging from unconsciousness in any individual enriches the possibilities for consciousness in all individuals. Your wound was not just yours. It was the wound of humanity seeking healing through your particular incarnation. From this understanding comes the final quality that makes your calm reply haunt forever. Its impersonal universality. While it emerges from your most personal experience, it speaks to the most universal truths. While it addresses the specific situation at hand, it illuminates the archetypal patterns that underlie all such situations. While it responds to this particular person, it serves the healing of the entire human condition. The sacred wound has taught you that healing is not the absence of scars, but the integration of scars into a greater wholeness, not the forgetting of pain, but the transformation of pain into wisdom, not the transcendence of humanity, but the full embrace of what it means to be beautifully, brokenly, courageously human. From this understanding emerges the response that heals by its very existence, that transforms by its very presence, that haunts because it offers something that the soul recognizes as its deepest longing, the possibility of turning our wounds into gifts, our suffering into service, our pain into the medicine the world desperately needs. There are words that die with their speaking, utterances that dissipate like smoke in the wind, responses that disappear into the chatter of ordinary human discourse without leaving so much as a ripple in the vast ocean of consciousness. And then there are words that echo across eternity, not because they seek to haunt, but because they carry within them the resonance of truth, so pure, so clear, so undeniably real, that they become part of the eternal human story of awakening. The calm reply that haunts forever emerges from the marriage of all the elements we have explored: the wounded healer's silence, the fire of provocation, the death of personas, the compost of the Nigredo, the mirror of relationship, the alchemy of restraint, the soul's language, the reversal of power, the hermit's lamp, the resurrection of authenticity, and the sacred wound's wisdom. It is not one thing, but all things integrated, not a single moment, but the culmination of an entire journey, not a technique, but the spontaneous expression of consciousness that has been refined in the crucible of genuine human experience. When such a reply finally emerges, when the moment arrives that calls forth this response from the depths of your being, something unprecedented enters the field of human interaction. It carries within it the concentrated essence of all the transformation you have undergone, all the consciousness you have developed, all the integration you have achieved through your willingness to descend into darkness and emerge into light. The words themselves may be simple, even ordinary. The power lies not in their complexity, but in their source, not in their cleverness, but in their authenticity, not in their ability to wound, but in their capacity to awaken. They emerge from the place where personal truth meets universal reality, where individual understanding touches collective wisdom, where the human soul encounters its own divine nature and speaks from that recognition. This reply does not seek to haunt. It haunts because it comes from such depths of truth that it awakens in the listener memories they had forgotten, possibilities they had abandoned, realities they had buried beneath layers of protection and pretense. It reminds them of who they are beneath all their costumes and performances, what they are capable of, beyond their current limitations, what they long for in the deepest chambers of their being. The haunting quality emerges because the reply touches something eternal in the human psyche, the part that recognizes truth regardless of whether the ego wants to hear it, the aspect that resonates with authenticity even when the persona is committed to pretense, the dimension that responds to consciousness even when the mind is determined to remain unconscious. Watch how the reply unfolds in the consciousness of the one who hears it. At first, there may be resistance, rejection, even increased aggression, as the ego recognizes a threat to its carefully constructed reality. But beneath this surface reaction, something else is happening. Seeds are being planted in soil that has been prepared by the very suffering that drove them to attack you in the first place. The words continue their work long after they are spoken, like medicine moving slowly through the system, like water finding its way through seemingly solid rock, like light gradually penetrating the darkness. They create cracks in the armor of unconsciousness, openings in the defenses against truth, spaces where new possibilities can take root and grow. This is not manipulation or strategy. It is the natural effect of consciousness encountering unconsciousness, of truth interfacing with illusion, of authentic being, meeting defended pretense. The reply carries within it all the transformative power that you have accessed through your own journey, and this power naturally seeks to catalyze similar transformation in others, not through force, but through resonance, not through coercion, but through recognition. The person who attacked you becomes the unwitting recipient of a transmission that transcends ordinary human communication. They came seeking to engage your unconsciousness and instead encountered your consciousness. They arrived hoping to trigger your reactivity and instead activated your presence. They attempted to diminish your light and instead experienced its full radiance, focused through the lens of compassionate understanding. The echo begins immediately but may not be recognized for what it is. The attacker may walk away convinced that they have won, that they have successfully wounded you, that their projection has found its mark. But something has changed in their internal landscape. Something has shifted in the depths of their being. Something new has been introduced into their psyche that will continue working regardless of their conscious recognition or acceptance. This is the mystery of transformative communication. It operates at levels far deeper than ordinary understanding, affects dimensions of being that are normally inaccessible to conscious awareness, plants seeds in the unconscious that may not sprout for years or even lifetimes, but that carry within them the potential for complete transformation. The echo spreads beyond the immediate interaction. Others who witness the exchange, who observe the quality of your response, who feel the field of consciousness that your presence creates, they too become carriers of this transmission. The ripples extend outward like circles on a pond, touching lives you will never know, affecting transformations you will never witness, contributing to awakenings you will never be able to trace back to their source. This is how consciousness spreads in the world, not through preaching or teaching or trying to convince, but through being so authentically present, so genuinely conscious, so completely aligned with truth, that your very existence becomes a catalyst for awakening in all who encounter it. Your calm reply becomes part of the eternal conversation between consciousness and unconsciousness that has been going on since the beginning of human history. The haunting quality deepens over time. What seemed like just words in the moment of speaking begins to reveal layer upon layer of meaning as the listener's own consciousness develops enough to comprehend what they actually heard. They begin to remember not just what you said, but how it felt to be in the presence of such integrated being, such authentic power, such fearless truth. They may find themselves returning to the memory of that moment again and again, each time discovering new dimensions of meaning, new levels of understanding, new possibilities that they had not previously been able to perceive. The reply becomes a touchstone in their own journey toward consciousness, a reference point for authentic response, a reminder of what becomes possible when human beings align themselves with truth, rather than defend themselves against it. Years may pass before they fully understand what they experienced in that moment of encounter. Decades may elapse before they recognize the seeds that were planted in the soil of their unconsciousness. Lifetimes may be required before the full flowering of the transformation that began with your calm reply reaches its complete expression. But the work continues regardless of recognition or acknowledgement, regardless of gratitude or understanding, regardless of whether the transformation is conscious or unconscious. The reply you spoke from the depths of your being becomes part of the eternal library of human wisdom, part of the ongoing revelation of what becomes possible when consciousness emerges from unconsciousness, part of the endless story of souls awakening to their own true nature. This is why some replies echo through eternity while others fade into forgotten noise. The eternal reply emerges from eternal truth, touches eternal realities, awakens eternal possibilities. It participates in the timeless conversation between love and fear, light and darkness, consciousness and its own absence. It becomes part of the cosmic process by which the universe comes to know itself through the awakening consciousness of individuals. The calm reply that haunts forever is not your reply. It is consciousness itself speaking through the unique vessel of your individual being, using your particular journey, your specific wounds transformed into wisdom, your personal integration of shadow and light, as the instrument through which universal truth can express itself in this moment, with these particular people in these specific circumstances. You become a temporary spokesperson for the eternal, a momentary mouthpiece for the infinite, a brief but perfect conduit through which the deepest truths of existence can enter the world of ordinary human interaction and plant seeds of transformation that will continue growing long after your individual life has ended. This is the ultimate meaning of the reply that haunts forever. It transcends the personal to touch the transpersonal, moves beyond the individual to serve the collective, extends past the temporal to participate in the eternal. It becomes part of the great work of consciousness awakening to itself, part of the endless project of love learning to express itself through human incarnation, part of the infinite story of light emerging from darkness, through the courage of individuals willing to make the journey from unconsciousness to awareness. The echo continues, will always continue, rippling outward through dimensions of being that ordinary consciousness cannot perceive, touching lives in ways that cannot be measured, contributing to transformations that cannot be tracked, serving purposes that can only be intuited by those who have themselves made the complete journey from reaction to response, from unconsciousness to awareness, from woundedness to wholeness. In the end, the reply that haunts forever haunts not because it wounds but because it heals, not because it diminishes but because it illuminates, not because it closes possibilities but because it opens them. It haunts because it offers what every human soul is ultimately seeking, the recognition of its own true nature, the remembrance of its own divine essence, the awakening to its own infinite potential for consciousness, compassion, and authentic being. This is the echo that transforms eternity, not by changing what is eternal, but by revealing what has always been true, not by adding to what is infinite, but by removing the veils that obscure our vision of the infinite, not by creating new possibilities, but by awakening us to the possibilities that have been waiting patiently for our recognition since the moment consciousness first stirred in the depths of existence itself.